Joining me today on Dolphin Tales is a Jacksonville rowing alum, 2014, Scott Del Vecchio. Scott, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't we, before we dive into everything we're going to talk about, why don't you just give the viewers just a little bit of your background, who you are, and we'll start there.
Yeah, I've got a pretty complicated history. I'm sure we'll go through it, but yeah, went to JU between 2010 and 2014. That's a very weird way to describe it. But did exercise science there before it turned into whatever that program is right now, and was part of the varsity rowing team all 4 years. And then, yeah, after that, went into um, uh, fitness technology realm after getting my master's, and rode at an elite level for the past however many years. And now I'm solely focusing on my career and my family life. And yeah, that's about it.
There you go. Awesome. Well, let's talk about, you said you had a very long, kind of varied past. So why don't you talk just a little bit about, I know you weren't born in the US, so talk about, kind of your early childhood, and then not too much, but obviously, but getting into, when you started rowing and then your decision to come to Jacksonville University.
Yeah. So long story short, my mom's French, my dad's American. And I was born and raised right outside of Paris. My mom and her brothers were actually Olympic and national team members for France on the rowing world, which is how I kind of got into it. And then I actually moved somewhere in the middle of high school to Florida, where my dad lived. And then through the end of high school, one of my coaches at the time, who had been a coxswain, which is the little person in the front of the boat, coaching and steering, had gone to JU. And as I was looking at all these major places to go in the US, I was like, well, that's kind of far enough, but not too far, and it's affordable, and it has exercise science, and it has rowing. So it kind of was everything that I needed at the time. And went on a recruiting visit, and yeah, that was it. It was just kind of a really nice catalyst to start my college career, and as a student, but also as a rower. So
there you go. Well, I know we've had several members of past rowing teams, so a lot of rowing alums that have talked about their time at the university, their time as part of the team. And rowing's always been one of those things that has really been just a fantastic program. Even back when I was there, it's just really, athletics overall had a really nice period of time in the early 2000s, and rowing was certainly part of that. And I know you talked about when we had a prior conversation just about your experience at a smaller university. And I know that's one of the things that we've talked about a lot in the show is the different feel of the university, the tight-knit group and all those things. So one of the things that you had talked about was seeing some of the people that went off and kind of chased the bigger university setting, the bigger programs with football and bigger athletics and bigger Greek life and stuff like that. So talk a little bit about what you saw and what you experienced with them going off and you staying.
Yeah, so I have a very biased view on things, which I would describe as whenever I start something, I like to finish it, like go all the way through. I'm not very much a person who gives up. And so I remember either the first or second semester of freshman year, and I'm watching all these kids, one, walk around with UF shirts or, FSU shirts. I'm like, one, you're doing it wrong. But two, some people would be like, oh, next year I'm going here because, we're not big enough. We're not on ESPN for this reason, or that, whatever it was. And for me, that was very, they had it wrong. And one, because that was their fault for not doing the research. A lot of people show up to college without visiting or understanding what they're going to do there, or if they even like it. And it's a relationship, right? You're in a 4-year relationship with that school, with everything that revolves around it. And so if you decide to all of a sudden just start that relationship and then be like, this wasn't for me, I don't know, that's spineless to me. Anyways, but but yeah, and so a lot of people left because they wanted this grand thing. And then a lot of people came in later on because they were like, that was too big for me. And so the way I saw it was, you pick JU because it did well enough in the realm of athletics. It did well enough in the realm of academics and in its location and everything that it has, that has to do with Jacksonville. But also, um, you were, you meant something within that realm. You weren't just another number. I remember a lot of my high school friends went to UCF, for example. And in their freshman biology class, there were 400 plus people, and some people had to sit on the stairs, or if you didn't make it on time or even before the time, like 10 minutes before to get a seat, you couldn't enter the classroom and had to do something live. And in my mind, I was like, that sounds terrible, versus, my relationship with my teachers, which they knew exactly what was going on in my life. And that's not a necessary thing, but it's really nice to come to class and they know exactly who you are. And if you're looking tired because you just came out of practice, they know that, versus like, here's another kid who doesn't care about school. So
Right.
that's kind of how I interpreted that whole situation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was really nice them understand, most of the teachers and professors understanding that, we were balancing a lot. And so to have their support and understanding, like you said, not just, kind of pigeonholing you as a kid that didn't care. It's no, maybe you traveled all night to get back from a meet and, but you're still here, so having that. And I know, like you said, you went through and the program has changed a little bit, but you had some very specific mentors and experiences within that program that really helped set you up for what you're doing now. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So back when I was going through the exercise science degree, it was very much, I would say it was even correlating with like the sociology group of kids who were basically just trying to get through school. A lot of times it was athletes, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm one, like I said earlier, like I don't like to just endure. Like I want to enjoy and I want to learn and all that stuff. So for me, I entered that program thinking, okay, like I'm going to learn a ton about sports science, and there's so much to do with it. And a lot of the kids that were going through that program were trying to either be like, a high school or whatever coach for whatever sport. They were trying to be PTs. They were trying to be personal trainers a lot, life coaches or whatever. And I was thinking to myself, I'm learning a ton of really important information. And to me, that's not enough. And so as the years developed, I was always taking a couple classes, like when I was a sophomore, I was taking senior classes because it was so interesting and I wanted to get ahead. And I was also doing like a minor in French, which, you could call me spineless for that. But, so I had a lot of classes, and with rowing, it was packed all the time. But somebody that I really looked up to and that was very helpful was, the chairman of the program at the time, who is Chris Robertson. And so he was just like this guy who went to Indiana and went all the way up to get a doctorate and did all this really cool neuroscience research. And it was just so fulfilling hanging out in his office, which he had decorated in a very neat way. And we just, I would sit there and talk to him and talk about his dissertation and different routes that we could take. And, by the end, I took a independent study under him. And I remember one time at the very end, he was like, I'm not going to give you an A plus because I had done the study well, but he was like, I'm not going to give you a perfect score because that would be just going against, how I feel about schooling and stuff. It was just really neat. Like he really, really helped me. And from there, I think I'm the only one who ended up going into the research route. And then, I did my master's in sports science and wrote research papers and was part of a lab in Paris. And so that I totally, give credit to that guy for helping me go beyond the potential that a lot of students were setting themselves up for. So
That's great. Well, tell me a little bit about your time with rowing. Like I said, we've had several guys on who have been part of the program, and I'll always say when I have someone from the rowing team on, the one thing I remember about rowing crew is we would be at whatever stage of the season we were in, either preseason and it postseason, we'd always see y'all just running around campus, no matter what time of day you're just running. So I know you're still into endurance sports, and that probably sets you up. But why don't you first tell me just a little bit about your time, part of the team, and what all went into it?
Yeah, so JU rowing has had a roller coaster history, right? So it's had a couple different really high moments, in the 70s with the knee guards, and obviously it correlated with the basketball, and I'm sure that was awesome to be around then on campus. But that's one thing that I hope through this next generation of kids that we tie our alumni a lot better, so that we know the exact history of what happened of through the years. But basically, when I got recruited, the coaches and the program had gone to IRAs, which is the biggest like national championship regatta meaning rowing race, or any water race really. And they had just come back from that, and that was like the pinnacle of what JU rowing had done, going there in the 8 and all that stuff. So I was so stoked to get there and be with all these guys. And what happened was a few of those members ended up leaving or graduating or whatever it was. So it was really neat for me to be able to just come in as an underdog, as a freshman, and all of a sudden take those spots. So for me, that was really cool. And my freshman year was awesome. I had some insane mentors in the rowing part of that year, including Dylan Costin. I went to his wedding 2 years ago. It's just stuff like that where you build these relationships and they stay strong. But after that, in those 4 years, it was very hard because we had a lot of coaching changes and a lot of culture changes, and then random kids would come in as freshmen and disrupt the culture. And some people might say that's good, some people might say it's bad, but it all depends on what the coaches are doing. And so we had like some muddy water stuff going on. And ultimately, my junior year, I went with Preston, who is the assistant coach, and 2 other guys, and we went to IRAs again, and were able to put JU on the map again. And we took another dip after I left, and nothing related to me, obviously, but now it's on its way up, and it's just so interesting watching it do this like wave and have this roller coaster feeling, because you stay in contact with the kids that were freshmen when you're a senior, and you're listening to them having a hard time or having a good time. And then you're like, well, it's not fair that they're getting all these new boats when I did it, stuff like that. And so there's this jealousy, and you're managing all these emotions. But it's cool because at least you're part of something, versus like I went to school and I got my degree and that's it, right? And then you forget about JU or forget about your school. So I'd rather deal with those emotions than not have them at all. So
right. Well, and I know you and I talked about it, and we've mentioned this several times. That jealousy factor. While very personally, it's like, man, I can't believe they get all this great stuff. You want that. You want that for the next generation, for the kids that are coming through. If it was exactly the same as it was when I first got there, you wouldn't have had the experience that you had, and it keeps trickling down. So to see things bigger and better, for them to have more of a, in my opinion, more of a holistic view and support system for the student athlete than just you go, you get an education, you do your sport, and then away you go. I think there's a lot of things that they're doing to really support the person overall. And certainly with everything that happened last year, and I don't think it's going to change much moving forward. I see a lot of things that they're doing. So again, it's like there's this part of you that's like, man, can't believe they get all this great stuff, but you want that for the program. And I know they're working really hard to continue to elevate it. So I totally get the jealousy thing.
And across the board in school too. I mean, just like these new buildings, these new features to programs, and everything that's available to to the overall JU student. It's just really, really neat to see them. And, you'll randomly walk on campus a couple of years later and be like, cool, that's awesome that you get this. And, we had to like eat a bunch of fried food all the time.
That's right.
Fried catfish or whatever. So, yeah.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about what you're doing now? So let's start with, I know you're married, moved out to Texas. Talk a little bit about that transition from Jacksonville out to the high country, as you were calling it.
Yeah. It's obviously, again, a lot of crazy roller coaster stuff, but long story short, after JU, went to Paris, did a master's there. That was kind of like a hybrid of science and MBA, like an MS and an MBA, and obviously did research there and whatnot, and then moved out to San Francisco, where I joined like a kind of like a pro rowing club that doesn't exist anymore, but definitely was like the top of the line in the US. And while I was doing that, I entered the workforce in fitness tech. So we built a wearable, and it was awesome. Just being able to use all that research, all that stuff that I learned at JU, and actually putting into, a real product that's in the Silicon Valley, which is like the tech hub of innovation, right? And I've jumped around for different jobs, but ultimately I decided to kind of abandon a lot of like my relationships and a lot of like putting effort towards career and more towards my rowing career, which for the past Olympiad, which is the 4 years you do to prepare for the Olympics, was kind of like a top 10 guy in the US for lightweight rowing. And so I was able to travel all around the US and do different training camps and kind of be at the part of that elite group. And then as 2019 ended, I decided to stop that rowing so that I could focus on, making a little bit of cash. I'm 29 now, so I should probably do that. And then I was very much in love with my now wife. So, you have to make those decisions. But in the midst of that, I joined a startup called Hydro, which is kind of like the Peloton of rowing. And so I was an athlete for them, a pro athlete behind the scenes, but I was on the production side. And I decided not to continue with them to continue finishing my rowing season, but I met somebody there called Nick Karwoski, who, fantastic human being, started this company called TagALong, and it was kind of just under the covers and not really nothing was really happening. But the mission behind it was to help athletes, pro athletes, make an income while they're training. That's the underlying mission. But the kind of like our slogan is connecting athletes to improve together. So we help connect amateur athletes with professional athletes so that they can train together, kind of demystify this whole professional athlete. They're untouchable and they're all these like LeBron James, when most of the endurance world isn't like that. And you're living on couches. And I was actually living on Nick's couch at that time, which is a pretty funny thing. And so, yeah, I decided to jump on to help him out. And then now, 2 years down the road, I'm the director of media and partnerships for that startup. And we just launched a new app that is really streamlined so that people don't really have to exchange too much information, and they can chat through the app and find each other and based on their sport. It's just such a neat concept where in the fitness world, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of available apps and training things, but here it's kind of one of its own. And yeah, if you have any specific questions, I can answer that, but
yeah,
there's so much to it. So
it's super interesting because I have a few friends who are professional athletes and kind of across the board, from just the traditional sports to endurance sports and things like that. And you're right. You see, when you think of professional athletes, you do think of, the top, 0.01% of the athletes to get all the endorsements and all that. And even in the mainstream sports, the guys that aren't at the top getting the biggest endorsements, you still kind of lump them all together and say they're untouchable. You can't really get to them. And specifically in endurance, where you've got, swimming, rowing, running, biking, those types of things. Again, from the professionals that I know that I'm friends with and clients that we have at Adaptive, it is very hard for them to, put in the amount of training that they need to actually compete while also trying to make some money. And so for this, there's a huge need both from the athlete side of things, but then also, washed up guys like me that would love to go ride, run, swim with these professional athletes, because just being able to, like you said, tag along with them and learn from them. There's so many things besides just going out for that training. There's, what do I eat? What do I wear? How do I recover? All that stuff. So it seems like a really cool process. So tell me just a little bit more. You said you're about 2 years in. Just a little bit more on that.
Yeah. So the first year he started it was like, there was nothing happening. He had, asked a bunch of his elite friends to jump on, and things weren't moving. And I will say that in the startup world, you gotta almost just like give up everything and go full tilt on those businesses, because you can't do things half-ass. So you can't just decide, oh, I'll work. It's not just like coding where you can just like knock it all out in one night, and on the weekends. It's like a lot of relationship building. It's a lot of like looking for it. There's a sales aspect of like, hey, you should come to us, and help, and because we have a good story, and ultimately it is very beneficial. I was talking to some woman who had no athletic background, was very insecure, and then all of a sudden started doing TagALong and with Nick actually on a bunch of different stuff, and we had a call just to catch up, and she like started kind of tearing up because it changed her life. And that's one aspect of it, and I'm really looking forward to when we're able to help somebody get to the Olympics, or be able to get a partnership with a big brand or whatever. But yeah, so the first few years were a little hard, and I wouldn't even consider those real financial years. They were just like setting ourselves up. But now it's like we have like 100 pros on the platform of like across 6 different main endurance sports. And actually today I got a text from one of the pros saying, hey, thanks for sending this person my way for a consultation call. And I'm like, I didn't send anybody. And so the fact that now we're in this streamline thing where people are understanding how to do things and we don't have to handhold, and it sounds silly to say that, but anybody who's done any startup stuff, you have to do a lot of handholding. Like the guys at Airbnb used to meet you at the door and open the door for you, and that's kind of like, you always have to bring that mentality down and be like, okay, I'm going to have to do a lot of this for these people. And now we're kind of entering that in between moment where it's the people are starting to figure it out. And it's really cool. And we're partnering with a couple of different companies that are going to help us branch out and, create some clothing for people to feel like they're part of our community, and always giving back to the pros. We're always looking to, instead of spending a ton of money on marketing, it's like, okay, well, our marketing pieces are the pro athletes, so let's put money in their pockets. And and we also are figuring out as we go, because my formal education was science. I wasn't a marketing guy, but I figured it out on my own based off of what I needed back when I was an athlete. And yeah, it's very interesting. It's very organic.
No, that's great. Like you said, to get people that either just want to try a new sport and have no idea what they're doing, people that are pretty serious about it and just need that extra help. It goes back to our playing days, our athletic days from the very beginning through JU and you at the elite level. You had to have that coach. There's people at the D1 level obviously have something internal that drives them to get better, to go put the work in when no one's watching. But to have that person that can help you structure, to help just be there with you, that's a huge part of it. And I know that was a big letdown for me when I got done playing, it was like, you don't have the team aspect. You don't have your buddies that you're out there training with, doing your thing. And so, to have someone that could help kind of pull you along and ask the dumb questions like, should I drink water right now? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's a really cool thing.
And we use a quote all the time, which I think it's something like 72% of people perform better when they're training with or alongside somebody better than them. And that's the whole concept of sports. Like, whether you're playing against that person or you're, training next to a really good athlete, you're gonna pull every single thing out of you. And we're making people try to use the best of their time, because ultimately the people who are using TagALong are people who are like you and I, married, have kids, or have a full-time job, and they can only train 4 times a week, versus like me, I would knock out 4 sessions in a day and a half. So, and then there's differences, but being able to have that relationship with a pro who understands what you're going through life, or because they're still managing, trying to get all their sessions while also having like maybe a part-time job, but also traveling here and blah, 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 and not having any money and food or whatever. And so it's really interesting because we're all the same. We just have different engines and we have different priorities in life. And that's what's really neat, is being able to have those people meet in the middle and
right. Well, you talked about, you get there, you get to JU as a freshman, and you can see your progression over the 4 years because you were with people that were better, that pushed you, not just the older people, but even, guys that came in after you that were better. It all pushed you to get better. I agree. I did a lot of running during COVID over the summer. It was by myself and just up and down, A1A, First Street, all that stuff. Well, now I've got my old teammate and roommate, Ryan Corson and I are doing a 45 miler this weekend. He's making me run faster. There's days where I don't want to, but he's faster than me. So I go. So I totally get, having someone that is better than you, because you kind of hitch onto them and you go.
And you get to be part of their journey too. Like, one thing that the pros are always stoked about is like getting to see that kind of light in their eyes when they're like, I can't believe I just ran at this pace or whatever. And then vice versa, you're like, we hope that like the end all story is like, I trained that whole last year with that person, and now they're about to start on the Olympic final on TV on NBC, like that actually gave me the chills a little bit. But that's kind of, there's so much to give. There's so much community. There's so many resources that we can all help each other out with. And it's such a incredible feeling when it actually works. And yeah, I'm really hopeful that we touch a lot more people's lives.
That's great. All right. So Scott, final question. I'm going to put you on the spot. I need your best JU story. It can be rowing, it can be class, it can be whatever, but your best JU story.
Oh man. I'm sure I have some ridiculous stuff that I probably shouldn't even say, but
you're the first person to say that, by the way.
What's that?
You're the first person to say that they have a story they couldn't tell on the show.
Yeah,
so.
Probably some bad stories, but one that's appropriate is, it's not so much of a story, but I remember one time going into the caf and getting my food, and it's lunchtime, and I can't even remember his name. I'm blanking. The very tall basketball player that's the assistant to the president.
Artis Gilmore.
Yeah, Artis. Sorry, I just blanked.
No, you're good.
He walks in and he's just grabbing lunch, and I remember getting a Coke or like some water or whatever, and I'm getting a drink, and he walks up to me and he literally puts his plate like at shoulder level on top of the Coke machine, and I'm just like, and I met him a million times, but I was just like, like you see him walking all the time and you're like, man, he's so tall. But then you see him do things like that where you're like, for you, it'd be like, you'd be on your, that's, I just love that there's all this weird differentiation around JU. There's so many different types of people, and it's always a hoot to like watch him walk around, especially because his wife's like maybe half his size. It's just stuff like that. So that's probably my most appropriate story.
That's awesome. We had artists on, it was last episode or 1 or 2 ago. Yeah. So I've got pictures where he would be out of frame right now if he were sitting next to me. So
Yeah, I have a picture with him, and I was like, "Am I that small?" And I'm 5'11", but like I was like, "Am I really that small?" Like his belt's like right here next to us. So
that's right. I found a picture of him and Muggsy Bogues. So he was chasing Muggsy, who was, for those who don't know, he was like the shortest NBA player ever. And so it's artists chasing him down. It looks like him chasing a child around the court. It's fantastic. So I told him about that.
actually, one more story. Sorry.
Go for it.
And this is part of being, this kind of comes around, but it was I loved college sports, and college basketball was so fun to always watch with my dad. And I remember my freshman year, at the end of our first semester, we were playing during the winter break. We were playing UF at UF, and I was like, man, like I should go. And so Preston, who he's the assistant coach, him and his dad and I went with the girl I was dating at the time. We all went to that game, and it's full of UF fans. And then there's 4 JU guys, JU people, like, rooting on. And we won, like, buzzer shot. And it made me so pride. Like, I had so much pride for these guys, because it's like, here we are, like, whenever you make it on ESPN, it's such an awesome moment,
Right.
or whenever they get featured. And so to beat UF at that time, who was like undefeated basically, and just being like, holy crap, like we mean something to the world. And you can interpret that however you want, but like that's such a neat feeling. And I think instead of being on ESPN all the time and being this like powerhouse of us, with tons of money, being able to be like, whenever it does happen, that's such a special moment that I'll remember, versus anybody who was at that game on the UF side is just another game.
Right. That's awesome. Well, Scott, I really appreciate the conversation today. Thank you for coming on, and you're welcome back anytime.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.